Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Word for Women. It is a delight to be with you today and to continue our series on many faiths. So 2 weeks ago, we began with an overview on Christianity. Last week, we learned a little bit about Buddhism. This week, we are pleased to welcome Michelle from the Islamic Resource Group to help teach us about Islam. And so we're very excited to welcome her. Please give her a round of applause. All right, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you so much. Well, thank you all for having me. As you heard, my name is Michelle. I like to start a little bit with an introduction on who I am and who we are as Islamic Resource Group. We're a nonprofit organization, and we feel that the key is really understanding as education and dialogue, which it seems like everybody here has been doing a little bit of in this series. There is a statistic that seems like common knowledge, but the more you know about someone, the less fearful you are of them, right? So if you have no Muslims in your life or no one to chat about or even see, them in your regular everyday life, then you may fear what you don't know. So this is what Islamic Resource Group is. We've been around for almost 25 years. Really just educating the community and the wider community about what Muslims believe and who Muslims are. I'm going to skip through this a little bit, but just so you know, all of our speakers are volunteers and we are trained, so we do have training as well. We've done presentations in schools, houses of worship, businesses, law enforcement, nonprofits, you name it, we've been there. Now, a little bit about me before we jump into Islam 101. My name is Michelle. I've lived in Minnesota. I'm a transplant to Minnesota this is my 4th year here. I'm born and raised in Ohio, and we did similar work in Ohio, just a different name to it. So when I came and I found out about Islamic Resource Group, I knew that was a place that I wanted to be. I moved here actually for a job. I manage the Rabata Cultural Center. We are located in Arden Hills. So if you're a teacher, an educator of any kind, or you're looking for diverse books, we have a bookshop at the center that do feature Muslim main characters and information there. So if anybody's looking, please see me. That's what I do during the day, and Islamic Resource Group is my fun around that as well. So we're going to jump right in. What I'm going to ask, I saw that a lot of you have paper and notes. Yay, I love that. What I'm going to ask is that you write your questions down if you have them, because I know our time is limited. So what I want to do is I want to get through the presentation, and then once I'm through the presentation, I'm going to open the floor, and I'm here as long as you guys want me here, right? So don't worry, I have nothing else to do after this. So we'll jump in, and whatever questions you have. Also, I'm super flexible, so maybe you have that curious question that you thought about, like, I wish I could ask a Muslim this. Please feel free and feel comfortable to ask me that as well. Okay, so a little bit more about me is I am a convert to Islam. So I converted to Islam in 2011. So I've been Muslim for 14 years now. So just a little bit, that's a small part of my journey, but you can see that as we talk about the presentation, some of where my background comes from. So what we're going to start with is the demographics of Muslims and like the words, right? So we're going to jump right into Islam. Islam is an Arabic word that means peace through submission to God's will. Now, I start here because oftentimes you hear this word made into a lot of derivatives that just don't exist. So we'll start here to know that vocabulary-wise, this is the name of the religion. So the name of the religion is Islam, and if you're looking for a definition, it means peace through submission to God's will, okay? Now, the practicer of that religion is a Muslim, right? So this is where I said you hear a lot of different derivatives once you hear Islam. Who practices Islam? Muslims practice Islam. The same as Christianity is the religion, and Christians practice Christianity. So Muslim, the name, like the word Muslim, means one who submits to God's will. So just as a vocab lesson so that we're there, so you know what words we're talking about. Also, I will pause I am fasting for Ramadan. It is Ramadan for those that don't know. So don't worry if my mouth is dry. This is normal. We're at the end of Ramadan. We've been doing it all month. But that's also, where I'm at as well. All right. Now I have a trivia question for all of you here. And I'm sure some of you guys have had classes before. You've learned about Muslims, so you know this. So I want to hear the answer. Which country in the world, and this map could give you a clue, but which country in the world has the most Muslims? The most Muslims, just by sheer number, but also by percentage-wise too. This country actually fills both gaps there. You can shout out the answers, no worries. We had Pakistan, I heard Egypt, I heard Iran, Saudi Arabia, India, somewhere in Africa, Indonesia. Okay, so I'm going to stop there because somebody got the right answer. Indonesia. So when usually when I present this, a lot of times people are like, oh, it's, an Eastern Asian religion as well. And in Indonesia, and we'll go ahead and go to the next so you can kind of see the numbers. In Indonesia, there are 229 million Muslims, and that is about 98% of the population. Like it is a pretty substantial percentage there. And so that's, an interesting fun fact is as Muslims, we're always looking for food without pork in it, right? So you always know if you go to an Indonesian restaurant, it's very, very rare that you're going to find pork in that menu, right? So like, oh, I've got it. That's a great place to be. I heard some people shout out Pakistan. Pakistan is right there. It's the next highly populated, so 200.4 million. And these are a little bit dated in research because it's done by Pew Research, and getting the demographics of religion isn't as easy as it seems, right? So they do their research there from 2017. India is next, followed by Bangladesh. And just for comparison's sake, we put the United States on there so you can see how many Muslims are in the U.S. About 1% of the U.S. population is Muslim. Now, this is just a fun facts that I like to show so that you can see the 20 most populated Muslim countries, and you'll see some of the names of the countries that you yelled out, so don't worry, you weren't super far from it. But also, for curiosity's sake, are there any countries here where you're like, really? Is there anything that kind of catches you off guard a little bit? India. India is a very populated country. I think it has the most people in it. It's like they compete with China, right, in population-wise. And so in India, even if just 20% is Muslim, that's a big number of 1 billion people, right? So there are a lot of Muslims in India. Yeah, is there another one that surprises you a bit? China, yeah. So in China, there is a community in China, like the Uyghur community, that is Muslim and has been Muslim for a long time. They are there and thriving. So also, by sheer number, China has a lot of people. So even if it's a small percentage, they're going to end up on there, right? Just because there's a lot of people in China. All right, so like I said, this is just fun trivia facts, but also for us to recognize that Islam is not a monolith. You're not going to only find Arabs that practice Islam. If you look, actually, we don't get to the first Arabic country until Egypt. And so even if when you look there, and when I say that's just Arabic speaking, Egypt in and of itself has a lot of diversity as well. So just something to think about when you think about Muslims and like our preconceived notions of like what it means to be a Muslim. A little bit about Islam in America and the Muslims that you'll meet here. 1/3 of the enslaved Africans brought to North America were actually Muslim. A wonderful book that I recommend is called Servants of Allah, and it is not written by a Muslim. It's actually written by a non-Muslim, by Sylviane, and now Her last name slips my mind. We call it fasting fog, when you've been fasting all month. But it is a wonderful book, and she talks about that history of the enslaved Africans that were brought that were Muslim and ways that they have held on to their faith that people don't even realize. Traditions of just the way in some African American churches, there may be some running around the church that mimics that same circulation around the Kaaba, right? Things that were kind of held on to into that. So it's more of an academic read, but I would recommend it. It's a wonderful book. Here, we're about 1% of the population. And in Minnesota, this, like I said, this statistic was taken around 2017. So 160,000 Muslims in Minnesota. I really believe that we've grown since then. I would put it maybe at about 180 right now. But there's about 180,000 Muslims in Minnesota. And I don't know if you guys recognize that space, but that is a picture of, two people celebrating Eid at Mall of America. And so just even that space of knowing Muslims have been in America for generations and generations. And fun fact, the first country to recognize America as a sovereign state was actually Morocco. So it was a Muslim country to recognize America as a sovereign state. So just to reiterate that Muslims are not a monolith, this picture is always really fun for all of us because it is a picture of a wedding celebration, right? And in this celebration, you have so many cultures that came together, but every single person in this picture is a Muslim. So in the center, you're going to find I think more to the left of the center, you're going to find a man and a woman. The man is from Turkey, born and raised in Turkey. He is of Turkish descent, and he moved to Germany. And his wife, there to his left, is German, born and raised in Germany, Muslim. And that is, her heritage. And they got married, came to America, and their daughter to the left of him is American, born and raised in Minnesota, right? She was born in Minnesota. This is where she's from, and that's, what brought up her culture. Now, when she got married, she married a young Sudanese gentleman, and you'll see he is from America, and his parents are from Sudan on both ends there. And you can kind of see how, even culture is represented here in the way that they're dressed, in the way that they appear, but all are there. They're all Muslim. And while this may seem obvious, right, because Christians aren't all the same, for some reason, Muslims are boxed into one monolith, like this is how we all look. In Minnesota, I would venture to say a good portion would see Somali as like the imprint of what we think of as a Muslim. Like we see a Somali American, like this is how Muslims dress and how Muslims are. While there are religious practices that must be followed, they can manifest in different ways. So even the way someone might wear the scarf on their head, right? Or the way that, like the food that someone might eat. They won't eat pork, but their dishes are all influenced by whatever crops or food was available in the regions that they came from. One really fun thing, iftar is the meal that we break our fast with. At Rabata, the center that I manage, we have a weekly iftar on Thursdays. And the first iftar of every single year that we've been doing since I've been in Minnesota is the Minnesota iftar. And so what do you think we serve? Hot dish. Yeah. So it's like a day. And of course, salads that aren't really salads, right? So we have like Snickers salad, ambrosia salad. We have hamburger hot dish, tater tot hot dish, all the wonderful foods. It took me a while as a transplant. In Ohio, we call it a casserole. But I was schooled really fast that it's a hot dish. And we do that, as an introduction to communities that maybe have never had a hot dish, but also because we're Minnesotan and, we're Muslim too. So having that as our meal to break our fast with is totally okay as well. So now I'm going to jump into what Muslims believe. This is the creed, right? This is, in general, every Muslim you meet, you will find that they believe these 6 things. I'm going to zoom through it so fast, but like I said, please write down any questions or something that you were like, whoa, slow down, and we'll go back to it later. But I want to make sure you get all of this information. This is the basic belief system of Muslims. And I'm going to go through this one by one. So this is just a big picture. If you're writing down, don't worry. We're going to go one by one, and we're going to check it out. But the first one is God. Muslims believe in God, and Muslims strongly are monotheists. This is one thing that you will hear any Muslim that you meet will really caution about worshiping anything besides God, the Creator. God, the Creator, that's it. There's one God. And the word Allah is just the Arabic word for God. So I lived in Egypt for about 3 years. And, even there, the Coptic Christians call God Allah. When I say Alhamdulillah, like praise to Allah, the Christians also say Alhamdulillah. The words are there because that's just a translation for the meaning God, right? Now, some things that you may hear or may have heard along the way is 99 names. Does God have 99 names, really? These are the characteristics and names that God has called himself within the Quran. So you may find them translated to like the most merciful, the most just, the most loving. These names are all names that we're referred to, the most forgiving. So when it says there's 99 names, it's in just reference to that, the names that God has called himself, right? And so these are ways, and I know I heard a beautiful prayer when I came in, calling on God by his attributes are beautiful ways to pray. So sometimes you'll hear Muslims say, the most merciful, I'm calling out to you for your mercy, right? So very similar to the way that maybe you are praying here as well. Like you're calling on the attributes of God. This is the same God of Abraham. So Islam itself is considered an Abrahamic religion. So the same with Christianity and Judaism. And one thing, though, just so it's noted here, a big difference between Islam and Judaism, Christianity, is that imagery is avoided. We do not know what God looks like. We don't have an image of what God looks like. We haven't seen God to know what God looks like or what entity God is. So Muslims strongly avoid any image of God. This is a big difference because I do know in the Bible that it says that God created man in his image. This concept is not found in Islamic belief or practice. So we will avoid all imagery of God. You won't find a picture of Allah. Now, on the flip side, when you get to the prophets, there's some dispute in that. But this one is one that Muslims are unified on. You will not find any location like where they're like, oh no, it's okay to try to draw the image that we see. Versus like in, popular culture here or in Christian culture, you'll find movies where God is portrayed, right? Where they have like what God looks like or even paintings of what God looks like or how it's manifested. So this is one belief where that is a difference. Now, Muslims also believe in the unseen world, which is why angels are here. Angels are everywhere around us, right? As children, we're born with angels that take our good deeds and write down our not so good deeds, right? And they're taking account. We are born with a guardian angel that is around us all the time. We have angels that come for gatherings like this, where they're just coming, where good words are spoken amongst people, and angels are just sitting around. We're here. Now, angels in Islam, they do not disobey God. Angels are created differently than humans. Angels are created from light, and they have no free will in that they just obey God. There's no place for them to be disobedient. So even in like the angel of death, the angel Gabriel, for example, is a common angel that is throughout multiple religions. And angel Gabriel is very important in Islam. He's the angel of revelation. He's the angel that brought the books that we have, received on this earth and revealed them to the prophets were brought from angel Gabriel. Now, as also with the unseen world, we also do believe that there are other beings besides us as well. And so this is a difference between Christianity and Islam, is that we do believe there are beings called jinn. They're created from fire. They do have free will. And the devil, or Satan, was from the jinn, not from the angels. So that when he had a choice to obey God or disobey God, and that's what he had chosen. So there is that unseen world happening, and we do believe in that unseen world. Muslims also believe in prophets. Now, prophets along the way, and we're going to continue on with prophets as we go to the next slide, but prophets all have one similar message. Now, while it might have manifested a little different along the ages, but the message is there is only one God. Bring people back to worshiping only one God, not idols or a polytheism, worshiping one God, and by doing good deeds, like do good. Basically, that's what prophets came. Stop acting up, do good, and worship one God. That's there, that's where we're at. Now, here's just this slide, it doesn't really go in chronological order. It's just to kind of show some names that we're familiar with. But these are all names that we know of prophets in Islam: Adam, Noah, Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jesus, Moses, and Muhammad. Muhammad is the final prophet, the seal of the prophethood. So there will be no prophet after Prophet Muhammad. Peace and blessings be upon all of them. The prophets are all descendants of Adam, so you'll often hear Muslims call people children of Adam. We have a word, Bani Adam, like in the Quran, God calls us Bani Adam, like all children of Adam, which is the children of, we're humanity. We're all connected in that way. So this is just to show some commonalities within the prophethood, but I do want to focus on Prophet Muhammad because this is what is unique to Islam. Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was born in Mecca, common day, like Mecca, Arabian Peninsula. It's common day Saudi Arabia in 570. And the first revelation he received from Angel Gabriel was not until he was 40. So it was in 610. And he started teaching monotheism, right? The area where he was from, had a strong, remember what we went back to, what do prophets teach? One God and do good to people. Really, that's the teachings of the prophets. And that didn't change with Prophet Muhammad. Now, in this time, though, like anywhere, the tribes that had money really depended on their money from idol worship and different things of that nature, right? So the Muslims were strongly and heavily persecuted. I like to pause here because it's not in our slide, but I want to mention this because oftentimes, when we go back to that demographics of Islam, some people say they're surprised about Ethiopia, right? They're like, wow, Ethiopia has that many Muslims? Well, during this time of persecution, there was a King Najashi in Ethiopia, in Abyssinia at the time, and he was a Christian king, and the Muslims sought refuge there. So they migrated there first. The first migration for Muslims for safety was in Ethiopia. And it was in between this time, between like 610 and 622, where they found a home in Medina. Because all of the Muslims that you find that had migrated to both Ethiopia and then went to live in Medina later, they're called the Muslims of two migrations, right, of that time. And just recognizing that there's actually a mosque in modern-day Eritrea that is older than the mosque in Medina, Saudi Arabia, right? And that's because of that there. And they found safety. And, the story is really beautiful. If you ever just... Here's my permission to Google that, I don't give permission a lot of Google, but the story of the chapter called Maryam and King Najashi. So there's a chapter in the Quran called Maryam, and it is in reference to Mother Mary. And when the Muslims first took migration, he's like, how do I trust you guys, that you're not coming here to take over? And they recited from that chapter of the Quran. And the king cried and said, you know what, yeah, this is the same Mother Mary that I know. And he's like, as long as you're here, you're safe here, right? So he left them a safe space. Now just to jump in, eventually Muslims did find a safe home in Medina. Medina was the first actual Muslim city, Muslim establishment, right? This is the first Muslim community, Islamic community. They were welcomed there. And this is where the Islamic calendar starts. So this is also another difference. Like when you see the Islamic calendar, it does not start with the birth of the Prophet, Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. It starts with the start of the Islamic community and an actual city there. The Prophet Muhammad died in 632, and Islam continued to spread at that time as well. So another thing that Muslims believe in, and there's a consensus on this, is we do believe in all of the holy books. Now, along the way, Muslims believe that some of the books previous to the Quran were not preserved in the same way that the Quran is. So we take what is good from the books, and then the things that just don't make sense, we kind of leave on the shelf, right? And those books are the scrolls that were sent to Abraham, the Torah sent to Musa, Moses, the Psalms sent to David, and the Gospel sent to Jesus, or Isa. If you ever meet a kiddo named Isa, it's just Jesus in Arabic. And then the Quran sent to Muhammad. Peace and blessings be upon all of them. Now, the Quran in and of itself is considered a miracle because it has not been altered in the same way some of the other books have been. So it's preserved in its original language. This is why when you pick up a Quran, it is going to be in Arabic. Now, does that mean we don't have something in English? Not at all. We have tools to help us understand, but we clearly call it translation. And anyone who speaks more than one language here, one thing that you will recognize is that sometimes some things are hard to translate, right? Like it's simple in that language, it's understood, but when you translate it into English, it loses some of its meaning. And so that's one reason why Muslims have held on to not changing the Quran itself and keeping it in its original language. It is the primary source of guidance for Muslims, and most Muslims that you meet can read Arabic and recite the Quran in Arabic. So any Quran that you pick up that's in Arabic, you'll find that Muslims learn from even a young age. And then this is, now that you know that Indonesia has the most populated Muslims, it's a beautiful time to search Indonesian Quran reciters. They have some very beautiful recitations of the Quran by Indonesian women. And I love listening to it, and their voices are just so beautiful, the way that they share that word. I think even to this day, the Quran is one of the most memorized books in order to hold on to that as well. Now, hadith is another word that you may have heard. These are teachings and practices of Prophet Muhammad and also his companions. They provide the details. Sometimes you read something and you don't know how it's applied. Maybe I read something in the Quran, or I received something, and then you read it and you're like, wait, I would have done it this way, and I would have done it this way. Well, where do we go? We go to hadith, where it shows how Prophet Muhammad did it and that interpretation was, right? So we have this example that we're able to see and know how the practice was put into place. Now, hadith science is actually a very detailed science. We have so many hadith books, and the sayings and the actions of Prophet Muhammad in these books are rated from very strong to weak, and we even have a book of false hadith. And the reason we have that one is because there were people at certain times that thought to make a profit, right? Like they say, blueberries are really wonderful because Prophet Muhammad said that they were wonderful, and to buy them, right? And we're like, well, blueberries, I'm giving a really vague example, okay? But they weren't in that region, right? You don't grow blueberries there, right? So then you would recognize that immediately, that this is false. But the way that they verified these things, there are scholars that literally went back and noted in the chain of narration that who in this chain is a good person. Like if this person had poor character, they were known for being like the town drunk, for example, they're not going to take that information there unless we have from 70 other people that all said that this happened. Then we know this is a really strong hadith, right? Down to what is a really weak hadith based on a lot of variables. But just so you know how strong it is when we're reading the words of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. And here's just some notable words that have been used in media, so you might recognize it. But these are words that are attributed to Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. The most perfect of you is the best in morality, and the best of you is the one best to his family. God does not look upon your appearances, he looks upon your hearts and your deeds. You are not a believer unless you want for your brother what you want for yourself. Now, I do want to pause here. This is one of those translation things. it translates to brother, but in Arabic, that actually means brother and sister. So it should say, unless you want for your sibling what you want for yourself, right? And then a Muslim is one from whom people are safe physically and verbally, safe from his hand and from his tongue. So these are just some notable passages. We have, like I said, there are so many that exist. These are just a small few that were pulled. One thing that I want to pause on that I didn't mention is oftentimes in translation as well, God is referred to as he, because that's the only way to translate that. But in Islam, God does not have a gender. God is genderless. We don't know, there's no gender associated with God. God is beyond human creation. So there's not a gender associated. But oftentimes you will find in the translation that it's translated to he. So just as something there to think about. Now, another thing that Muslims believe is in the day of judgment. So everyone will be held to account for their deeds. And Muslims believe in an afterlife in heaven and hell. So there will be a day of judgment, and there will be an afterlife, in that space as well. Now, divine decree is the way it's translated in Arabic. It's qada wa qadr. And this here is really saying that God is the creator of everything. Allah knows everything that's going to happen, but we have free will to choose. As humans, we have free will. We are not like angels. We were created from the clay. We have free will. God gave us free will to choose where we are going to be. Are we going to worship God, or are we not going to worship God? Are we going to choose in that path? This book is not a Muslim book, what I'm going to recommend. So now I guess you guys are seeing my daytime passion, since we have a bookshop at the center. Midnight Library, if any of you have read Midnight Library, it actually is a really good way to explain this concept. All of the many ways of what Midnight Library, by the way, I'm not giving anything away. It starts with she died. The person died, and you're finding out that the way she died and the manner and things like this were all because of choices in her life, right? But there's this library of if she would have went this way, the choice would have ended like this. And if she would have went this way, it would have ended like this. It's a fictional book. But the reason I like it is because it brings that concept of we do have free will, but Allah knows whatever way we're going to choose of where it's going to end up for us, right? So we do have that free will. So that's kind of what that means there. All right, I'm done with the belief systems. That's the creed and what Muslims believe, right? That place where you're going to find commonality. Now, another big difference within Islam is a very lived faith. So you are going to find that you can recognize Muslims just by what they're doing every day. And I'm going to run through this really quickly so that you guys all have time for questions. These are the 5 pillars. This is the lived faith of Islam. Number 1 is, how do you become Muslim? What is it? What makes you a Muslim? You declare your faith. There is no God but God. There is no deity out there worthy of worship except God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God. And that's it. That's the way to enter into Islam, is to just declare the faith. That's the first pillar, is declaration of faith. The second pillar, now that you're a Muslim, you're required to pray 5 daily ritual prayers. These are the ritual prayers. There are other prayers in Islam, but these are the ones that are mandatory. Now, right now in March, it goes with where the sun is in the sky of when our prayer time is. So around 5:30 a.m. is the dawn prayer right now. The noon prayer is around 1-ish something. Mid-afternoon is 4:45. Sunset is around 7:30 right now, and the night prayer is 8:50. But these change throughout the year. The reason I'm letting you know this is because if any of you work with Muslims or maybe they report to you, they might need to change their break time. And in case you're wondering why, this is why, right? So we have this requirement of the prayer. Let me show you what it looks like. This is a full cycle of a prayer. Now, depending on which time of day, depends on how many cycles are there. In that first one where they're standing in prayer, that's when you are reciting from the Quran. So you start by reciting the first chapter of the Quran and then another part of the Quran that you choose. But you always will recite that first chapter. And then there's other things that you say when you are bowing down in front of God. You are thanking him, subhanallah, glory be to God. And then when you are actually in prostration, there's another thanks to God that you're giving. And then when you sit up, you're remembering God too. So this is one cycle, and depending on each time of day, depends on how many cycles you do. If you've ever been to a mosque, here's another thing for that Arabic word. It just means a place of prostration. Yeah, you can see kids are always wanting to do what the grown-ups do, so it's always fun there. We do have a picture of Masjid an-Nur here. The reason we have this picture is because it is a very American mosque. Masjid an-Nur has been around for a long time in Minnesota. It is an African-American mosque. The imam is African-American, and it very much is an American Muslim mosque. So if you were to go visit one to see really American Muslim culture, I would go to Masjid an-Nur. They're very welcoming too. Like if you were like, yeah, I just want to come and see what a Friday service is like, they will gladly open their doors for you. Now, one thing that we also have that is part of those 5 pillars of lived Islam that we have there is a mandatory charity given by Muslims. I would say it's similar to tithing, but it's a little bit different. 2.5% of accumulated wealth is donated to the poor and needy Muslims every year. Now, what does that mean? It means if I'm living paycheck to paycheck, I'm not required to give that, right? This is for those that have a savings. There's a certain amount of savings that you need to get to. It's based on the currency of gold, like whatever gold is worth. I think right now the savings amount is like $3,500, around there. Don't quote me exactly. If you go to Google today and it says 32, it's kind of based on that there. And if you've had that saved for an entire year, then you would give 2.5% of that. And it's distributed to the poor and needy. There's a couple other people that qualify, such as like the traveler. So think of an exchange student or somebody studying from abroad here that might need, a little extra help, right? There's other things that could cause you to qualify for that charity. This is the mandatory charity. Now, any other charity is welcome to give in Islam, but this is the one that's mandatory for those that can't afford it. Like it's been accumulated wealth. Now, here we are. It is Ramadan, and so fasting is also a pillar of Islam. So you're going to meet Muslims that are fasting from dawn, that dawn prayer that we talked about, to sunset. And yes, that shirt that he has on, no, not even water. That is the first question that people ask when you're fasting. Not even water? You can't even have water? No, not even water. And that's always the answer. So the reason we fast, and the Quranic verse is here, is it actually says, oh, you who believe, fasting is prescribed for you as it was the people before you, right? So the reason we fast is just because it's prescribed for us. These are all bonuses that you get, like increased piety. You can't think, you're not thinking about food. You're trying to increase your worship, right? You're building willpower. You have compassion. You have spiritual growth. Those are all bonuses. But the reason we fast is just because we're commanded in the Quran to fast. Now, fasting for the month of Ramadan is mandatory for all those that are able. So a question I commonly get is like, what if you have to take a medication? Fasting is not required upon you. Actually, if you say I have a friend, I'll use her as an example. She had a double lung transplant. So anybody that's had a transplant, they have to take medication every day to keep that, like their body from rejecting organs, right? This is there. It has to happen. So for her, it actually becomes forbidden for her to fast. If it will cause you harm to fast, then it becomes forbidden because and by harm, we don't mean like my dry mouth that I have today, right? Like that's not the harm I'm talking about. It's annoying. I'm a little tired. I get a little bit of fasting fog, but it's not something that's not the harm that we're referring to. These are things because even pregnant women can fast if they're drinking enough water throughout the night and they're having a healthy pregnancy. It's a short enough day that it's okay. But now if you're having a pregnancy, say with gestational diabetes, it's a different situation, then that part of their life, they wouldn't fast, right? So just to kind of understand, fasting also doesn't start until you've reached puberty. You may meet children that are fasting. If you ever meet a kid that's fasting, they are probably fasting since like an hour ago, right? So just so you know, they'll be like, I'm fasting. And you're like, oh, you are. And then they see a cookie and it's over. It's done. And as Muslims, we let our kids, you want them to love the faith and what you do. So you give them that oh yeah, you're fasting? Great, and then when they're ready to break it, you let them break it. And so the celebration after that day is Eid al-Fitr. This year it's going to be on Sunday. So if you know a Muslim, congratulate them on their fast. It's this Sunday. It's a big celebration. Actually, there are opportunities for like optional fasts throughout the year, but there's only 2 days that we are forbidden to fast. And that is Eid al-Fitr, this holiday, and then our next holiday, Eid al-Adha. And the reason being is because you can't celebrate and fast, okay? So this is where it's mandatory for us to celebrate in some way. And you start by going to the Eid prayer. You meet everybody. You wear your newest clothes. Like, this is a space where you're recommended to wear those newest clothes. If you don't got brand new clothes, shine up something that you've got and come to the prayer. Everybody is, recommended to come to the prayer. This is where you see the community, and you're all coming out and you're congratulating everybody on a beautiful Ramadan. And then after that, you see the celebration like Mall of America, right, where we saw earlier. The fifth pillar is the pilgrimage to Mecca, which is in modern-day Saudi Arabia. It's required once in a lifetime to those that can afford it. I had the opportunity to go in 2019, and it was one of the most beautiful experiences I've ever experienced in my life. And, I've done the smaller pilgrimage as well. I've gone back. But that at Hajj, it's called Hajj, that pilgrimage, where really over 3 million people come each year. And it is really beautiful to see people from all over the world coming for one purpose, right? Here's a picture of the Kaaba. This is the center of the Great Mosque in Mecca. Muslims believe that it was first built by Prophet Ibrahim. It's empty inside as a symbol of monotheism. Some people often confuse that Muslims are praying to the Kaaba. Muslims are not praying to the Kaaba. Muslims all pray in the same direction to unify us. So as Muslims, when we pray in that direction, do you know that no matter where you're at in the world, we're all praying in the same direction and towards the same way? And there are some ritual worship that you would do when you're on the pilgrimage as a reminder of what our ancestors did, like the predecessors' stories of Ibrahim and Hajar and Ishmael, and just different acts that we do within the Hajj will remind us of that as well. And you get a little bit squashed and a little bit comfortable with everybody, but it is a really beautiful experience. And after that, during actually, so the ones that are on pilgrimage, you're still doing your pilgrimage. You finished maybe stoning the devil. There's an act that we throw rocks at a wall and, to mimic that we are stoning the devil. During that time, we are back home celebrating Eid al-Adha. This is a really big celebration for us because we're celebrating the accomplishments of our other Muslims that got to go to Hajj, and we're celebrating and we're enjoying and we're having fun and we're doing that. And then the Muslims, when they come back, we welcome them back with a warm welcome and congratulate them on their pilgrimage. Okay, so I'm going to end here just because I know we are at the space and time, but I want to leave time for questions. I'm here as long as you guys need me, but I'm not offended if you were like, you told me 10:15, I'm out. If you get up and walk out, I respect your time, and it's okay. I know the schedule. So does anyone have any questions for me? I see. Oh, yes.
I always feel sad every year when I read about the pilgrimage. I understand about that, but I feel really sad when I hear about the deaths, people being crushed and stuff. And I'm like, why don't they do something to keep people safe?
Yeah, so just for those that you didn't hear, she said she feels sad every time in the news when the pilgrimage comes, there are people that die on the pilgrimage, whether they were crushed or something happened. So Muslims want to accomplish this in their life. In America, we're really blessed. I'm going to be very honest. If you want to go to Hajj, you get to go to Hajj. There's not a limit because we have such a small number of Muslims here that the Saudi Arabian government kind of just accepts you there, and you're accepted safely. Now, in other countries, let's say Egypt, for example, because I know Egypt because I've lived there, the government puts a limit on the amount of people that can come from that country because there's so many Muslims. I think there's 107 million people in Egypt, right? So they put a limit there. So then if people get the small chance to squeeze in, sometimes people don't do it, I would say, not legally, right? Like they get there on not on the right visa, or they get there because they really, really have this desire to do that pilgrimage. Egypt actually, unfortunately, last year had like, I think 500 and something deaths because of the heat exhaustion, but because they weren't housed properly, right? Because there wasn't a space, because it was, after they did the research, that group didn't come like through the proper channels. But you have to understand this strong desire that people want to go there, and it is really sad. And actually, I know I'm live streaming, so I don't know if I should say this. I have a lot of criticism of the Saudi Arabian government, a lot. But the way that they handle the Hajj is not one of them, because they're always building new infrastructures of protection. Now, if you go, you saw the Kaaba just from the center. There's actually floors built up around it so that if you are not as strong or capable as some of your fellow Muslims around you, you can go to the top floor and circle around, so you're not caught in that space where it's really crowded together, right? And they've offered this there, and they've really done a great job in that sense. And unfortunately, you can't force people to follow the rules all the time. And when that happens, things happen. Now, of course, there were accidents on their part throughout the years that deaths had happened, and they did what they could to fix that. And they're doing really a wonderful job, I would say. I was just in Saudi Arabia in November. I went to Mecca and Medina for the smaller pilgrimage, not the required one. It's one that I wanted to go, so it's a lot less people. But you can see that they're already preparing for what's to come in what will be like the end of May, June this year. But I agree, it is very sad. And then also to recognize that some people, they just spent their last dollar. They really wanted to go. They wanted to be there no matter what, it's there. And I know people in other countries, like India, where it has so many Muslims, that they're denied a Hajj visa every year, that maybe they got it when they were older. And they're like, you know what, I'm going to go. And even if this is it, I want to be there. I want to go at this space. Yeah.
On the custom of dress, my son's mother-in-law grew up in Egypt and Cairo, and they didn't even wear scarves on their head, nothing.
Yeah, so I'm going to be really, really blunt and honest here. It's colonialism. And so Egypt was colonized, so your son's mother-in-law is about the age of where they would say like the French or the English, depending on which part she was in, both colonized Egypt at a certain time, really had an influence in that. And you'll see that. Now, if you go to Cairo, I lived in Cairo for 3 years, and you see people with headscarves all the time. It's a very diverse community, and people wearing that. So if you're looking at a space, even some of the Coptic Christians will also wear a veil on their head as well. But you also have to look at, unfortunately, the governments of whatever government is there at the time and what they allow or don't allow, right? And some places, dictatorships are really hard. And so that's something to recognize too. So you'll see the dress. But the reason Muslims do cover their head, just so that it's out there, there is a verse in the Quran that says, "Oh, believing women, take your headscarf." So the verse, when it came down, women were already wearing something on their head, and pull it to the front so that you may be known. And so this was as a declaration, like you're Muslim. You wear the headscarf to be known as a Muslim. And also, in that same respect, the Quran also has a verse that says, "La ikraha fid din," that there is no compulsion in religion. So you're not going to be forced to wear the headscarf. That's a choice that you have to make. So you'll find a lot of variations of where that's at too, and how that choice manifests itself. But I will say, Egypt now is very diverse, and everywhere I was in Cairo, I lived in Cairo for that time as well, it was full of women with headscarves on. So much different, yeah.
Who do you say Jesus is?
So Muslims believe Jesus to be a prophet. Muslims do also believe that Jesus will be coming back, like there's a second coming of Jesus. Now, one big difference, and I know we're in Lent season, so I'm going to tell you what Muslims believe, and it's not, a criticism of your faith at all, but one big difference is Muslims do not believe that Jesus was crucified, but that God saved Jesus from the crucifixion. And at that time, Jesus was ascended into heaven at that time as a, saving of the prophet. And so Jesus is still is in the heavens and will come back at the end of time as well. Muslims believe that very similarly in that, in that second coming. So, yeah.
Could you talk just briefly about the role of men versus women? And I think that's one of the things that is confusing for Americans.
Yeah.
And is it a faith teaching versus cultural?
It's a little bit of both, and I do want to preface this too. Colonialism played a huge part. You have to we have to recognize that a good part of the Muslim world that we see and we have that experience of was colonized, by European countries for a good 150 years in there, right? So there's some things that were also put on from the English or books that you read and how they colonize and separation and men and women. So starting there. Now the roles, there are roles of men and women that naturally come, right? But they're not as black and white as, say, we want to compare them to 1950s America, I would say, or maybe even 1920s, where the woman stays home and the man works, and we want to compare it to that. In Islam, it's actually a lot different. Men are required to be the provider, but because women bear children, right? That's the big reason. Sometimes I see a room full of women here, right? We have, once you've had a baby, things change in your life, right? The way your body is, your energy, what's there. But women were never forbidden to work. Actually, some of the greatest scholars in our faith tradition are women. One of the greatest scholars of hadith that are recognized throughout the Muslim world is Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her. And she was one of the wives of the Prophet, but she went on after his death to continue to be a judge, to be a ruler on issues in the community. Also is one of the most narrated hadith were narrated from her. So just something to kind of think about. It's not a black and white answer in what we want to image, and I think sometimes that's where it gets crossed, right? So while there are roles that come from men and women just based on, our bodies, right? A man can't bear a child. We can be really honest about that, right? So there are some roles in there, meaning that he can't be a nursing mother too. There's things that happen in those roles. And so with that, men become the providers of the home. But women work, and what they do with their money, one great person that we think about is the first university ever was made in Morocco. And the money came from Fatima az-Zahri, and she took her inheritance money that she received, and she built a mosque and a university, and it became as the first, recognized as the first university in the world. So these constructs that we have, social constructs, I think sometimes we come with the lens of the Western American lens, and we want to put it on there to look like maybe a certain time period in America, which is not really what it looked like. Now, let me take a step back. Culturally, we have dictators in the world. We have governments that have taken over and decided to infiltrate their view on how things are. And that's a cultural or even a government restriction that I can't speak on, right? Because I don't live that reality. But the reality is there. Are there people being forbidden from education in certain parts of the Muslim world because they're a woman? Yes. Are there in other parts of the world that are not Muslim parts of the world? Yes. Is it wrong, and does it go against everything in our faith? Yes, right? So these are things that I recognize as it's hard to give a black and white answer, and I hope that helps to see it. It's not dictated by our faith in that sense, but unfortunately corrupt governments and dictators and colonialization have really affected how things are manifested in that way.
I'm going to give a 5-minute warning.
Okay.
And we're a little bit longer in a small group. If we want, would you be willing to do a 10-minute warning?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay with that? So get some of those questions answered. So at 10:40, I'm going to stand up again.
Yes, sounds good. I'm here. Yeah.
I just had a question. I noticed Moses was a prophet that was recognized.
Yeah.
Do you recognize the Ten Commandments? Does that play into
So the question for those, if you didn't hear, she said, I saw that Moses was one of the prophets recognized. You recognize the 10 Commandments. So Moses received those. We do have, actually in the Quran, Moses is one of the most talked about prophets in the Quran. So we have a lot of revelations and things that he received there. Now, as far as the 10 Commandments exactly as they are, no, it's not a like copy paste. But of course, like every prophet, if you think about the 10 Commandments, it's worship one God and do good. Like really, that's it. Because if you're doing good, you're not going to covet your neighbor's wife. You're not going to murder anybody. You're not going to, it's been a long time since I studied the 10 Commandments in their order, but you're going to, follow that. That's just a general moral code, right? So while it's not the exact copy paste of the 10 Commandments, I don't think you'll meet any Muslim that would disagree with it.
Do men and women pray separately in the mosques?
Yeah, so the question was, do men and women pray separately in the mosque? So men pray in the front and women pray in the back for the ritual prayers. So I want to make sure that I mention that. That's just the way to line up. And also, at the time of the prophet, it would be men in the front, women in the back, and children in the middle, kind of as a protection for the kids too, that they would be in the middle to pray. That's the ritual prayer where like you're bending down and you're going down in sujood. That's to kind of keep that focus all there in that space. Now, one really awesome tradition, I didn't talk much about this because we were zooming through, but Muslims have 3 words that we use for prayer that all translates in English as prayer, unfortunately, right? We have salah. This is our prayer that we do, like the ritual prayer 5 times a day. That's the one that you're talking about in the mosque. Now we also have what we call dua. This is a supplication where we are, supplicating and you ask God whatever is there. So one really awesome tradition in the Senegalese community that I really love is that the men pray, lead the prayer for that part, and then right afterward, the supplication or the dua is read out loud by a woman scholar in the community. So you'll hear both voices coming from there. And then the third one is dhikr, which just means remembrance. So that's where if you've ever seen Muslims with beads, I would say similar to like rosary beads, they're just remembering God in some way, and it's just a reminder to count. How many times am I going to say thank you, God, today? Thank you, God, thank you, God, thank you, God, right? But in the ritual prayer, the front and back. But when you will see other ways in the mosque, like if they're all coming together to make a supplication, they may be seated side by side. It may be seated by families. It's kind of like the culture of that mosque. So I saw a hand here first. No, was it there? Yes. Yes. Sure. I'm going to give the really quick answer, but all of you are welcome. If you want to know anything about me, you can find me at Rabata Cultural Center. You can always come by. I love having visitors at the center. But she said, you're a convert. How, what, when, why? So I converted to Islam in 2011, and really, actually, there's a long story for it. My family is Catholic by name, not by practice. So, I'm half Italian, half Polish, both from Catholic communities. And I wasn't really raised in a religious family. So when I was in high school, I started to kind of dabble in where I wanted to fit in and where I was. So I started attending a Pentecostal church. And so that's where I kind of found my home, and I was really just studying and had studied the Bible and was really focused on there. But there were some things that just for me didn't sit well. But I was really like, you know what, God's sovereign. I don't know, we're just going to let that be. Then I went to college. And so in college, there was a world religions class. I actually went to a Wesleyan college. And my professor, the first thing he did actually was ask about which country has the most Muslims? And, and I was shouting out all the countries except Indonesia, right? And then, when he said Indonesia, it shocked me because my ignorance, I thought that Islam was an Arab religion the same way Judaism was a Jewish religion. Whereas while there's a small number of Jewish converts, it's really like there's Jew can be an ethnicity, and it can also be a religion, right? So I thought Arab's an ethnicity, but it also is part of Islam. This was just something I made up in my head, by the way, guys. I don't know if anybody ever told me that growing up, but I was like, oh, that's okay. So I don't speak Arabic, so I can't, that's not for me. So I never even thought it was an option in my exploration of religions. So then Ramadan came, and I, at the time, from being my Pentecostal background, Pentecostals fast a lot for answers, kind of like Prophet Daniel used to fast in different ways. So they would fast for answers, and I was like, you know what, God, I'm not feeling comfortable here. I'm going to fast Ramadan. And then if this is for me, this is my prayer, make it easy for me to convert. And that really was my prayer and supplication. And that's the long story short. Of course, there was that journey of finding a mosque and, everything else that exists in that space. But that's then by the end of that Ramadan in 2011, I became Muslim. So that's the long story short. But if you want to ever have tea or coffee, I'm always open, I promise. You just come visit me. After Ramadan, of course. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, of course. Well, thank you all so much. And like I said, the invitation is really open. Come by Robatza Cultural Center anytime. I now know that it's a little bit of a drive, Maple Grove. I thought, transplants in Minnesota, Maplewood, Maple Grove, they sound the same. They're not the same. So if you look up, Robatza Cultural Center, I'm there 90% of the time, life as a manager. So thank you.